What if the city that put a plaque on every brick, that built an entire personality out of being older and prouder than anywhere else in America, has been quietly sitting on one of the richest food legacies on the whole continent, and somehow forgot to mention it? What if the most beloved cookie on planet Earth, the one in a jar on your counter right now, the one your grandmother swore she invented, was actually born by complete accident in a roadside inn just south of Boston? What if Boston, a city the food world has spent 2 centuries filing under beans, chowder, and not much else, secretly invented more of your everyday menu than almost anywhere in the country? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to look at your snack drawer, your dessert plate, and your morning coffee very, very differently.
Hi, my name is David, and this is Food Origins, the show where we pull back the curtain on the foods you grew up eating and find out they came from somewhere you never expected. If this is your first time here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because today we are going all in on Boston. And I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this list, the word Boston is going to mean a great deal more to you than tea parties, accents, and baseball. Let's get into it. Food number 1, the chocolate chip cookie. Let's start with the big one, the one that, depending on how you look at it, might just be the single most successful food invention in modern history. There are very few foods on Earth that are genuinely universal, that cross every border and every culture, and the chocolate chip cookie is one of them. And it was invented entirely by accident about 20 miles south of Boston. Now, I can already hear it. David, 20 miles south of Boston is not Boston. And you are technically correct. The town is called Whitman, Massachusetts. But hear me out, because Greater Boston is where this story lives and breathes, and you are going to forgive me by the end. The year was 1938. A woman named Ruth Wakefield ran a restaurant called the Toll House Inn with her husband, Kenneth. Ruth was not some amateur fumbling around a kitchen. She was a trained dietitian, a food professional who knew exactly what she was doing. And the legend that gets repeated everywhere, that she ran out of baker's chocolate and chopped up a bar of Nestle, expecting it to melt smoothly into the dough, is only half true. Ruth was far too skilled to expect a solid chunk of chocolate to simply vanish in the oven. The truth is, she wanted those little pieces to hold their shape. She was inventing something new on purpose. What came out of that oven was a butter-rich cookie studded with pockets of half-melted chocolate, crisp at the edge and soft in the middle. She called it the Toll House Chocolate Crunch Cookie, and it became so popular that here is the detail that stops people cold. Ruth Wakefield sold the rights to print her recipe on the Nestle packaging, and the most repeated version of the story says she did it for $1 and a lifetime supply of chocolate. $1. For a recipe that has since sold an almost incomprehensible mountain of chocolate and become the official cookie of the entire state of Massachusetts. Every chocolate chip cookie you have ever eaten, every batch of dough you have stolen straight from the bowl, every cookie aisle in every supermarket on Earth, traces back to one professional woman in a roadside inn just outside Boston who knew precisely what she was doing. Now you do too. Food number 2, the Boston cream pie. This one has the city's name baked right into it, which feels like cheating, except almost nobody knows the real story. And the real story is fantastic. The Boston cream pie was created in 1856 at the Parker House Hotel, a grand establishment in the heart of downtown Boston that opened the year before and, remarkably, is still open today as the Omni Parker House. The man behind it was a French chef working in that kitchen, and what he produced was a revelation for its time. 2 layers of soft, golden sponge cake, a thick band of vanilla custard running through the middle, and a glossy chocolate glaze poured over the top. And here's the first thing that trips everyone up. It is not a pie. It has never been a pie. It is unmistakably a cake. So why is it called a pie? Because back in the 1800s, cakes and pies were often baked in the very same round pans, and the words got tangled up in everyday kitchen language. The name stuck, the cake stayed, and to this day we are all walking around calling a cake a pie and nobody blinks. Now the Parker House itself deserves a moment, because this is not just any hotel. This is where John F. Kennedy proposed to Jackie. This is where a young Ho Chi Minh once worked as a baker, and where Malcolm X bussed tables. Charles Dickens stayed there for months. The building is soaked in history, and out of that kitchen came a dessert so beloved that in 1996, the state of Massachusetts made the Boston cream pie its official state dessert. A cake that is not a pie, born in a hotel that has fed presidents and revolutionaries, named after a city that adopted it as a point of civic pride. That is about as Boston as it gets. Food number 3, Boston baked beans. There is a reason Boston has been called Beantown for well over a century, and it is not a slogan somebody dreamed up. It is genuine, slow-cooked history. Boston baked beans are navy beans, sometimes called pea beans, baked low and slow for hours, often the better part of a day, with salt pork and a heavy pour of molasses until the whole pot turns deep, dark, and sweet. And the molasses is the entire key to understanding why this dish belongs to Boston specifically, and almost nowhere else. In colonial New England, the Puritans observed a strict Sabbath. No work, and crucially, no cooking from Saturday evening through Sunday. So families needed a dish they could prepare in advance, leave in a slow oven overnight, and eat across a day when the stove stayed dark. A pot of beans, baked on Saturday and eaten on Sunday, was the perfect answer. It was practical, it was filling, and it fit the rules. But why molasses? Here is the part most people never connect. Boston was one of the great molasses ports of the colonial world. Ships poured into the harbor carrying it by the barrel because the city was a center of the rum distilling trade, and that trade was tangled up in the darker chapters of the triangular trade across the Atlantic. Molasses was cheap, it was everywhere, and it was Boston. So it went into the beans, and a regional dish was born from geography, religion, and commerce colliding in one slow oven. The dish became so completely identified with the city that Boston earned the nickname Beantown, a name, and here is the lovely irony, that locals almost never use themselves. Ask someone from Boston if they call it Beantown, and you will get a look. But the beans are real, the history is real, and that pot of dark, sweet, slow-baked beans is one of the oldest food traditions in the country. Food number 4, New England clam chowder. If baked beans are Boston's Sunday, clam chowder is Boston's winter. That thick, creamy, milk and cream-based bowl, loaded with tender clams, soft potatoes, and salt pork, is so woven into the city that it is almost impossible to picture a Boston waterfront without it. And the first thing you need to understand is what it is not. It is not red. There are no tomatoes in it. Tomatoes in clam chowder is a Manhattan invention, and in New England, that is very close to a criminal offense. In fact, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that in 1939, a bill was actually introduced in the state of Maine to make it illegal to put tomatoes in chowder. That is how seriously this region takes it. The word chowder itself most likely comes from the French word chaudière, meaning a large cauldron, carried over by fishermen who cooked communal pots of whatever the sea gave them. One of the earliest printed references to chowder in America shows up in a Boston newspaper back in 1751, written, of all things, as a poem about chowder. That tells you everything about how deep this goes. And you can still trace it. The Union Oyster House in Boston, which opened in 1826 and is the oldest continuously operating restaurant in the entire United States, has been ladling out chowder since before most of the country existed in its current form. Creamy, white, steaming, and absolutely without tomatoes. New England took a humble fisherman's pot and turned it into a regional religion. Food number 5, the Parker House Roll. We are heading right back to that same hotel, because the Parker House did not stop at dessert. It also gave America one of its most beloved dinner rolls, and the origin story is genuinely delightful. Picture a soft, buttery, pillowy dinner roll with a distinctive fold across the middle, almost like a little folded pocketbook, light as anything and rich with butter. That is the Parker House Roll, and it was born in that hotel kitchen in the 1870s. The story that gets passed down goes like this. A German baker working at the hotel, in a fit of temper after an argument with a guest, supposedly grabbed a batch of unfinished dough and angrily flung the half-shaped pieces into the oven, folded and misshapen. Instead of a disaster,
What came out were these tender, folded rolls with a crisp exterior and a soft, buttery interior. And the hotel had accidentally invented an icon. Whether the angry baker tale is fact or charming embellishment, what is not in dispute is that the folded roll became a Parker House signature and then spread across the entire country. Open an old American cookbook and you will find Parker House rolls listed by name as the gold standard of what a dinner roll should be, on tables at Thanksgiving and Sunday suppers from coast to coast. Two of the most enduring items on the American table, the Boston cream pie and the Parker House roll, came out of the same hotel kitchen in the same city. Boston was not just making food, it was setting the template. Food number 6. Marshmallow fluff and the fluffernutter. Now we get into the truly local, the gloriously specific, the kind of food that people from elsewhere stare at in confusion, while everyone in Greater Boston nods like it is the most obvious thing in the world. In 1917, in Somerville, Massachusetts, just across the river from Boston, a man named Archibald Query started making a sweet, sticky, whipped marshmallow cream in his own kitchen and selling it door to door. The First World War got in the way of his ingredient supply, and Query eventually sold his recipe. Here is the detail that stops people cold. He sold that formula for around $500 to two men, Alan Durkee and Fred Maurer, who turned it into the product the whole region now knows simply as marshmallow fluff. That spreadable cloud of white sweetness has been made in the Boston area ever since. But fluff on its own is only half the legend. The other half is what New England did with it. Take 2 slices of soft white bread. Spread peanut butter on one side and marshmallow fluff on the other. Press them together and you have the fluffernutter, a sandwich so beloved in Massachusetts that it is treated as a genuine regional birthright. Generations of kids grew up on it, and this is not a small thing. The city of Somerville throws an annual festival called What the Fluff to celebrate it. And when a Massachusetts state senator once proposed limiting how often fluff could be served in school cafeterias, the backlash was so fierce that another lawmaker fired back by proposing the fluffernutter be named the official state sandwich. People will go to war over this. A door-to-door salesman in Somerville whipped up some marshmallow cream just over 100 years ago, and an entire region built an identity around it. Food number 7. Fig Newtons. This is the one where I love watching the realization land on people's faces in real time, because the answer to where Fig Newtons come from is hiding in plain sight, right there in the name. Fig Newtons are named after Newton, Massachusetts, a town just outside Boston. And here is how that happened. Back in the 1800s, there was a bakery in the Boston area, the Kennedy Biscuit Company, based in the Cambridgeport section of Cambridge, and they had a habit of naming their new products after nearby towns. They had a Beacon Hill biscuit, a Brighton, a Shrewsbury. So when, in 1891, they started producing a brand new cookie, a soft pastry wrapped around a layer of sweet fig jam, they reached for the same playbook and named it the Newton. The cookie was only possible because of a clever piece of machinery, a device that could pump a continuous rope of dough around a continuous rope of fig paste and cut it into those neat little pillows, which had been a genuinely difficult thing to manufacture before. The fig filling was the popular favorite, so over time it became the Fig Newton, and the Kennedy Biscuit Company eventually folded into the National Biscuit Company, which you know today as Nabisco. So the next time someone hands you a Fig Newton, you can tell them with complete confidence that they are eating a cookie named after a leafy suburb of Boston, baked from a recipe that started in a Cambridge factory more than a century and a quarter ago. The name was never about a person. It was about a place. And that place is Boston. Food number 8. America's very first chocolate. If you have ever baked a cake, you have probably reached for a box or a bar of baker's chocolate, and you almost certainly assumed the name just means chocolate for baking. It does not. Baker's chocolate is named after a man named Baker, and the story behind it is older than the United States itself. In 1765, on the banks of the Neponset River in the Dorchester area just south of Boston, a man named Dr. James Baker met a recently arrived Irish chocolate maker named John Hannon. Hannon knew how to grind cacao, but had no money. Baker had the money,
but not the skill. Together, they opened what is recognized as the first chocolate mill in the American colonies, using the river to power the grinding of cacao beans into chocolate. Think about the timing here. This is 1765. The American Revolution had not even begun. The country we now call the United States did not yet exist. And already, just outside Boston, water-powered mills were turning out chocolate for the colonies. The business eventually became Walter Baker and Company, and Baker's chocolate is still sitting on supermarket shelves today, with a history stretching back more than 2.5 centuries. So, America's relationship with chocolate, the foundation of an entire industry, the thing in your brownies and your frosting and your hot cocoa, did not start in some modern factory. It started on a river just outside Boston, more than a decade before the Declaration of Independence. Boston was making chocolate before America was even a country. Food number 9, the fried clam. We are going to take a quick trip up the coast from Boston for this one, to the North Shore town of Essex, Massachusetts, because what happened there created an entire category of American seafood. The date is the 3rd of July, 1916. A man named Lawrence Whitman, known to everyone as Chubby, ran a small roadside stand selling clams and homemade potato crisps. As the story goes, someone suggested, half joking, that he ought to try frying his clams the same way he fried his potatoes. Chubby gave it a shot, dipping whole clams in batter and dropping them into hot fat. What came out was crisp, golden, briny, and absolutely irresistible, and the whole belly fried clam was born. Woodman's of Essex is still there, still frying, more than a century later. The fried clam went on to define the New England Seafood Shack, that summer institution of paper trays, lemon wedges, and tartar sauce up and down the coast. And it scaled in a way Chubby could never have imagined, because a company you have absolutely heard of took the idea national. Howard Johnson's, the restaurant chain founded in Quincy, Massachusetts, put fried clam strips on menus across the entire country, introducing millions of inland Americans who had never seen the ocean to the taste of a fried clam. A roadside stand in a tiny coastal town. One slightly absurd suggestion on a summer day in 1916, and the result is a dish that became the soul of New England summer and traveled all the way across the country. Not bad for a clam. Food number 10, the chalky little candy that built an empire. Now, you might not have a strong opinion about Necco wafers, those pastel discs that taste a little bit like sweetened chalk and that people seem to either adore or be completely baffled by. But you absolutely need to know what Boston did for candy, because this city was, for a long stretch, the candy capital of the United States. It traces back to 1847, when a man named Oliver Chase, working in Boston, invented the first American candy-making machine, a lozenge cutter, to produce those little wafers quickly and uniformly. That invention helped launch what would eventually become the New England Confectionery Company, Necco for short, which went on to be the oldest continuously operating candy company in the entire country. And here is the part that touches your life, whether you realize it or not. That same family of candy makers in Boston pioneered the conversation heart, those little pastel sweethearts stamped with messages that flood every shop in America every single February for Valentine's Day. That tradition of printing tiny sayings on candy started right here in the Boston area in the 1800s. For decades, Cambridge and the streets around it were packed with candy factories, a genuine confectioner's row pumping out sweets that ended up in pockets and stockings and Valentine's boxes all over the country. So while the rest of America thinks of Boston as a city of revolutionaries and baseball, it was also, very quietly, the place that mechanized candy and put the words in your sweethearts. Boston has a serious sweet tooth, and it always has. Food number 11. And for the final one, I want to talk about something that is not really a single dish at all. It is a whole way of life. Because if there is one thing that truly fuels Boston, one thing you cannot walk 3 blocks in that city without encountering, it is Dunkin. In 1948, a man named William Rosenberg opened a donut and coffee shop in Quincy, Massachusetts, just south of Boston, and he originally called it the Open Kettle. 2 years later, in 1950, he renamed it Dunkin' Donuts, built around a simple, almost stubborn idea that a great cup of coffee and a fresh donut, served fast, cheap, and without any fuss, was something working people would line up for every single morning. He was right beyond his wildest dreams. But here's what makes this an origin story rather than just a business story. Dunkin in Boston is not really about donuts. It is a philosophy. It is the idea that coffee is not a luxury to be savored slowly in some quiet cafe, but a fast, democratic, everyday fuel for a hardworking city that does not have time to mess about. The phrase you will hear is that Boston runs on Dunkin, and it is not even really a joke. It is a statement of fact about how an entire region organizes its mornings. That whole template, fast coffee, a familiar order, an everyday ritual that costs a couple of dollars and asks nothing of you but loyalty, started in a parking lot in Quincy in 1948 and went on to circle the globe. Boston did not just invent foods, it invented the way a whole region wakes up. And that, more than anything, ties this entire list together. 11 foods, and underneath all of them, the same quiet Boston pattern. A city of thrift and weather and immigrant ingenuity that kept its head down, solved practical problems with whatever was on hand, and accidentally fed the rest of the country while barely bothering to take the credit. 11 foods, 11 stories. One city that everybody thought they had figured out, and almost nobody actually did. Boston is not just tea parties and red brick and a baseball team that breaks hearts. It is the city that gave the world the chocolate chip cookie by accident, the cake that everyone insists is a pie, the marshmallow spread that an entire region went to war over, and a donut shop that taught a whole country how to drink its coffee. It is a place that took molasses and a strict Sabbath and turned it into a national dish, that took a chocolate mill on a river and built it before the country was even born. That took a clam, a candy machine, and a leafy suburb called Newton, and quietly stitched them into your everyday life without ever once asking for a thank you. I'm David, and this is Food Origins. If this changed the way you think about Boston, or the way you think about that cookie you ate last night, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe, because we have stories exactly like this one lined up for cities, countries, and cuisines all over the map. And tell me down in the comments which one of these 11 surprised you the most. I have a feeling it is going to be the chocolate chip cookie, but honestly, I have been wrong before, and I love being wrong. I will see you in the next one.